5, but North Carolina State played their way in. The SEC was a very tough conference this year, as was the Big Ten. And the SEC, when you take a look at their teams, their records aren't that impressive overall, but they just chewed each other up in the conference all year long. If you take a look at their losses, they've just been beating up on each other all year long.
Before we talk about some of the teams that are playing at home, for instance, Syracuse and DePaul, let's go back to New York now. Billy Packer has a question for you, Dick. Billy?
Dick, we always hear about the great advantage of television exposure, but this last weekend exposed some people who got blown out, and one in particular really surprised me is Purdue, that looked like a solid shot as a #1 seed moving all the way down to a #3. Did that game yesterday kind of really hurt them?
Well, I think what that did, Billy, I think that just created a switch in positions between Indiana and Purdue. We did not do any seeding until probably 12:30 or 1 o'clock today, so we had all that information available to us before we started the seed, but I think probably that switched Indiana and Purdue in the seeding procedure.
You mean to tell me that an Indiana and Purdue would go from a 1 to a 3 based on one game, the way they played throughout the course of this season?
Well, I'll tell you, we felt there was so much parity between the first 8 to 12 teams in there that any one of those teams were almost interchangeable. The other thing you have to keep in mind in looking at the seeding, and that becomes a little bit deceptive, we're back to our old principle of not allowing conference teams to replay each other until the finals of the regional. So you've had to have some adjustments in seeds in there to keep those teams from playing in the second round or in the semifinal round. So don't let the 2 and the 3 deceive you in there. We couldn't have a 1 and 2 from the same conference together.
All right, Dick, thank you very much. Thank you for your help this weekend. The field is set. Now the headache's over, and now you can just sit back and relax and enjoy some basketball.
The headache might just be starting.
You look at some of the second-round games, Kentucky, Georgetown, and St. John's, DePaul. There are some tremendous matchups. Right now, let's go back to New York. Here's Jim Nantz.
All right, thank you, Tim. And when we come back, we'll hear from Brent and Billy and go through the pairings once more as we continue on the selection show in just a moment.
To the heart of the game. March Madness has arrived. The road to the Final Four begins late night Thursday on CBS Sports.
All right, that game late night Thursday will be from Salt Lake City. Again, it'll be Wyoming against Virginia. It gets started at 11:30 Eastern Time. Now in that Pac-10 final, 2 minutes to go now, and UCLA has an 8-point lead over Washington. The Houston Cougars anxiously watching the result of this game, because should Washington lose, then the Houston team would be in the field of 64. All right, Brent and Billy, who is this year's Purdue team?
Who has to go and try to win? Well, if you look right away at the pair, Purdue's going to Syracuse, but they're not going to have to play the Orangemen up in the Carrier Dome. The team that faces the toughest test is going to wind up being Illinois. If UAB beats Providence, now remember they're in Birmingham, and Illinois beats Austin Peay, then they must beat Birmingham in that city. And Billy, that's going to be a tough go, even though folks around the country really like the Fighting Illini right now.
Well, I think the Big Ten is going to be in a rough road, both of those places having to travel. But UAB is an outstanding team. They're coming on strong now. Gene Bartow, tournament tested. He's been in there for a long time now. This is his 7th year in a row. So it's a club with explosive guard play. Illinois will have their hands full.
Hey, you're surprised about the pairings. I could tell by your question to Dick.
I'm surprised at how much people have moved in relative strength as opposed to a year all of a sudden on this last weekend. DePaul, I mean, I would have looked at DePaul as a real threat to be a #1 seed, you know, and all of a sudden they're dropping down to a 3. In the same way with some of the Big Ten teams. I thought they were ranked a little lower than I anticipated.
All right, fellas, let's go right back through the pairings again, starting out with the East. Of course, the first round at Charlotte. #1 North Carolina will go against the Ivy League champion Penn. That Navy-Michigan game looks like an interesting one.
Exactly. Both those teams are tournament tested, and it could wind up North Carolina against the winner on Saturday to start the triple header, and that'll be a good matchup on Saturday.
Middle Tennessee State gets into the tournament. That's another story, Billy.
That really surprised me. I mean, if you start talking about Louisville, like I said, you got to play a tough schedule, and Louisville certainly did. They're not in, and Middle Tennessee State is. So it'll be interesting. Digger Phelps likes to be the giant killer. He might be in a reverse position here, similar to last year.
All right, that's the Charlotte bracket. Let's move to Syracuse in the East. Florida, North Carolina State, the Wolfpack. Could this be another Cinderella story for them?
Hey, I saw them just a couple of weeks ago, and I wondered if they're in any tournament when you saw that game with Jimmy Valvano's got that magic wand come March.
And as Brent mentioned, Syracuse will have a home court advantage playing at the Carrier Dome the first 2 games, should, of course, they get by Georgia Southern. Now, in Birmingham in the Southeast Regional, Providence and UAB, that's a tough assignment, obviously, for Providence, having to play on their home court.
They've got a week to rest up a little bit. They couldn't handle 2 nights in a row in the Big East tournament, but it's a very good club.
New Orleans, the host of this year's Final Four. That's a team alike with Liddell Eccles down there.
But, you know, look at below them, Jimmy. Alabama really is a team that a lot of folks think can go all the way to the Final Four this year. That'll be tough if they meet them.
Now, the regular season, won the SEC, won the postseason tournament today. Now, also in the Southeast region, in Atlanta, Georgetown draws Bucknell, but it could be Georgetown versus Kentucky. Even Ohio State, that's a good game over the weekend.
Well, I'm fascinated about Georgetown winding up #1 in the Southeast because a lot of the Hoyas today said, do you think we can go out west? Do you think we can be in Tucson?